Well, I'm back with number 6. At meetings, people are more likely to listen to men than they are to women. That is true. Men are listened to much more often than women are. Both male and female audiences tend to listen more attentively to male speakers. And part of this depends on how the audience perceives you look. If you're perceived as being handsome or pretty, beautiful, you will be listened to more often than if people see you as plain. 7. Men are more outwardly open. They use more eye contact and exhibit more friendliness than women do when first meeting someone. Well, that's false. It is women and not men who tend to maintain more eye contact and facial pleasantries. Women increase their eye contact in positive interactions, while men tend to feel more uncomfortable and decrease their eye contact. Women show more friendly behavior with smiles and head nods than men do. In general, men and women laugh at the same things. Men and women definitely differ in their sense of humor. Women tell jokes less frequently than men do. Male humor tends to be more hostile, abrasive, and sarcastic. Men also tend to joke around with one another as a bonding technique or to establish camaraderie with one another. 9. Men are harder on themselves and blame themselves more often than women do. That's false. Women tend to be more self-critical and more apt to blame themselves than men do. Women also tend to use more apologetic phrases in their conversations, such as, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," or "excuse me." And number 10, men tend to discuss things in greater detail when discussing an incident. Well, that's false. Women tend to be more detail-oriented and descriptive than men in what they say and how they explain things. So how'd you do? I think the average that people get in this true-false men and women communication exercise is about 5 or 6. If you've done better than that, you've done really well. But this does demonstrate how our culture helps determine for us, as we grow into our culture and live it out, how we communicate, and how we communicate as men and how we communicate as women. I'd like to read you something from Afghanistan. This is also about how men and women treat each other, the stereotypes we have of each other, and the cultural nuances that make life a reality. And I want you to think about the fact as I read this, that what I'm reading is reality, is law, is for the women of Afghanistan. This is from Kabul, Afghanistan, 2011. The headline is, "I am obliged to marry him, even though I can't look at him." 19-year-old Gunaz said about the man who raped her. Gunaz, who uses one name, has been in an Afghan prison cell for about 2 years. She says she has only one choice if she wants to bring dignity back to her family and tribe. She must marry the man who forced his way into her home, tied her up, and then raped her. The man was Gunaz's cousin's husband. And the humiliation continued a few months after the attack, when Gunaz finally got the courage to tell Afghan police what had happened. And instead of getting justice, she was accused of adultery and sent to prison. "I don't know why they put me in jail," Gunaz said when NBC News recently visited her at the women's prison in Kabul. Her daughter, Moshkan, a result of the rape, is sleeping on a bed nearby in the prison cell. She was born on the floor of that prison cell. According to Gunaz, she was initially, According to Gunaz, she was initially given a 2-year prison sentence, so she appealed. The Court of Appeals refused to accept her accusation of rape, she said, and raised her sentence to 12 years. They didn't believe she was raped because they told her that a woman couldn't get pregnant from her first sexual encounter. So therefore, she must have had a consensual sexual relationship with her accuser. Well, there's justice with a caveat. The ruling and statement outraged many, including American lawyer Kimberly Motley, who has been practicing law in Afghanistan for 3 years and decided to take on Gunaz's case. Just last week, Motley helped Gunaz gain a pardon from Afghan President Hamid Karzai. Can you imagine the president of a country being involved in whether or not a woman who was raped should get out of jail after being accused with adultery? The president of a country. But the pardon of Gunaz came with a caveat. A press release from the presidential palace stated that the president had decreed her release, taking into consideration the consent of both sides for a conditional wedlock. In other words, she was free to go if she agreed to marry her rapist, even though her rapist is already married. Now, that's not the victory many were hoping for, but it was a small victory for women in a society where women have few victories. Now just let that percolate around inside your head for a while. What would happen in this country? What would need to happen for President Trump to get involved in whether or not a woman who was accused of rape and then jailed could be released? Culture, who's to say what's right and what's wrong? How do we determine what is ethical? For us, the story I just read is, I believe, quite unethical. For Afghans, the ethical thing happened, and it went to the highest ranked person in the country to do something about it. So I'm going to end my second video here. We'll see what comes next.